me. To me, not for you, for someone else.
In today's shir, Be'ez Hashem, I would like to discuss and speak about the different oils, the kashrus of what one should use, what's Medina, what's L'tchatchila to use, L'mahadrin when you light the Menorah. It's still a few days to Hanukkah, but to be educated when you go shopping what to buy. L'gabi Shabbos, when somebody lights the mitzvah of Adlokas Ner Shabbos, so the Mishnah says, and as explained in the Gemara and all the Mefarshim, these certain oils to use and these certain wicks to use when you light, when you makayim the mitzvah d'Rabbanan of Adlokas Ner Shabbos. And the reason for that is, why is the particular wicks and oils? Because since you're nehena from the Hadlokas Ner Shabbos and Shema Yata, you might come if it doesn't burn properly, which means if you don't have a good oil and the oil is not nimshach, doesn't flow up nicely through the wick, as well if the wick is not a good wick, it's not going to burn nicely, it's going to go out, it's going to start flickering, and you're going to move it that it should be on Shabbos. So therefore, these halachas of what type of oil, so to speak, not lav dafka oil, but what oil and what type of wicks to use on Shabbos. However, the Gemara says, and that's how we paskin, when it comes to Chanukah, there is no specific oil to use, and there is no specific wick. Anything, kol hashmanim, all the wicks and all the oils are kosher for Chanukah. Anything you use is kosher, oil, wax, whatever burns is good. And the reason for that is because asa l'shtamash la'ira and kafsa ein zakakla, if it goes out, we're not concerned. If it doesn't burn properly, it's going to go out. Very clearly, there's a difference between Shabbos and Chanukah. Chanukah, you could light with any oil, any wick, as opposed to Shabbos, these halachas of what type of oil, what type of wick. So Shulchan Aruch and Tafrei Shayin Gimel Hilchos Chanukah, Kol hashmanim v'apsilos ksherim l'ner Chanukah, any shmanim oils that what causes that it should be able to burn, and wicks is kosher l'ner Chanukah. V'afal pi she'ein hashmanim shachan achapsila, even though the oil doesn't go properly through the wick, it's not burning nicely, it's not such a good wick, it's not such a good oil, it's kosher. So that's, for starters, Medina, to be makayim mitzvahs, adlokas ner Chanukah, you could use any oil and any wick. However, there's a hiddur, and then we'll go into different levels, but there's a hiddur. There's a hiddur that when you light the menorah, it should burn nicely. There's a hiddur, as the Ramah brings, Umiyu shemen zayis mitzvah min hamufcher, which, even though the Ramah starts off with shemen zayis, but anything that burns nicely, goes into that hiddur. As the Ramah says, the minig by him was to light with candles. So the first level above the din in hiddur is to light with anything that burns nicely, whether it's an oil, whether it's a wax, even if it's not an oil, what they have, by the Ahmad a lot of times, I forgot what it's called, that liquid, it's not an oil. If it burns nicely, you makayim the mitzvah, bihidura. But pashtas, the makor for this hiddur, above the ikar hadin, is how Tosfos understands the Gemara in Shabbos. The Gemara says that you're supposed to use wicks, oils that burn properly, that burn nicely, should be nidlak yafa. And Tosfos understands that Gemara is going l'gabi Chanukah. It's actually machlekes Rishonim. Tosfos understands it's going l'gabi Chanukah, and therefore you should light with oil or anything that burns nicely. Like the Ramah says, you could light even with wax, b'shava. However, though we see that is a maila, the hiddur is to light with anything that burns nicely, the Mishnah Brura brings from the Marie Bruna that is a maila of oil. Oil, any type of oil, but oil. Even though the Ramah says shava, wax is okay, but kol makom mitzvah b'shal shemen, to use oil. Any oil, cottonseed oil, whatever oil, of course the oil should be an oil that burns nicely. But what we just mentioned before, that whatever you use that burns nicely is good, including wax, shava, you should use oil. Why should you use oil? Because the oil is bedoima to the oil in the base, bedoima to the nest, what happened in the base Hamikdash. So maybe you should use oil.
Also for Shabbos,
we're only talking about Chanukah. Shabbos, In the Hiddur is also maybe what to speak about, but in Shabbos, me'ikar adin, the specific what you're allowed to use and what you're not allowed to use by Shabbos. By Chanukah, anything is good. However, there's a Hiddur that it should burn nice. It's just beautifying the mitzvah. And then there's another Hiddur in the mitzvah to use oil, because b'doimit to the nest of the Beis HaMikdash that was oil. It's really also a Meiri, the Lashon HaMeiri in Shabbos. Neiroi shal shava mutaras laner Chanukah. You could use candles, wax. Umakol mokum noi mitzvah lasais b'shemen, to use oil. Achar shanes haye b'shemen. So the next level after using anything that burns nicely, which is a hiddur, there's another level of using oil, which the oil is bedoimet to the nest of the Beis HaMikdash. However, the Maral with Prague, which the Sharatzian brings right here, the Maral actually holds that you need oil not just for hiddur, but me'ikar adin. He holds, we don't paskin like this Maral, but he holds if you don't use oil, you're not yotzei the mitzvah. Why? Because to be bakayim hadlokas ner Chanukah. What's the definition of ner? The definition of ner is, as we see in the pasuk of Parshas Truma, ner reiseh on Parshas the Vayakol Pekudei, and Rashi explains what's ner reiseh. Ner reiseh is the cup. Why is it called a ner? Because the cup is what causes that it should be able to burn. You have oil inside and you have wicks. As opposed to candles, there is no cup that holds it together. It's just a piece of wax that the wick burns down. Also, the whole thing disappears. So that's not included in ner. And there's a mitzvah to be mavlik ner Chanukah. So therefore he says you're not yotzei only with oil. So what we just said minutes ago, that you makayim the hiddur to use oil doimin lebeis hamikdash, the Maral holds it's not that it's just a hiddur, it's me'ikar adin. L'nafkamina, we don't paskin like that. Machzor shekels, we don't paskin like that. But l'nafkamina, if a person himself wants to use, or let's say for his kids to use candles, wax. So these levels of hiddur, so you could say, for chinuch, for the kids, you don't have to use wax, you don't have to use oil. But however, lafir Maral, you're not yotzei, so it doesn't pass chinuch, just like you can't give your kid a lemon instead of an esrig, right? So you're not yotzei, but maybe the same thing will be over here also. L'maisa, we don't pass like that. Another nafkamina, so to speak, between oil and wax. Again, the Medina, you could use anything. Behiddur is something that burns nicely, and even a bigger hiddur is to use oil because it's doimel lebeis hamikdash. It's just
going to hold if you have a nicer hadlaka for the candle, or oil with a little less nice hadlaka?
So I'm actually getting to this about nicer, but what would it mean? What would you define a nicer hadlaka in?
A nicer light. The fire itself is taller, cleaner, steadier.
Shemen is more of a hiddur. It's a good shaila, and we'll even get to soon other hidurim that a lot of poskim speak. What's the level of? We'll get to a few hidurim and shemen, and the poskim speak. I don't think I'm going to get to it, but the poskim speak. What's the level? Which hiddur over the next hiddur? It's a nice shaila what you're bringing up. Which is a bigger hiddur, to use the candle, which burns nicely, over the hiddur of using oil, which is doivel beis hamikdash.
Can you use 8 different oils at the same time?
So the poskim today, I forgot who, either Rabbi Feld or others, speak about using, even one is oil and one is candle, or one they look differently. If there's a hiddur, that they should look even. If oil and candles are the same thing, so technically you could use 2 candle, 2 oil. The shaila is if it looks nicer, there's a hiddur to look nicer, all the same.
One's olive, one's canola, one's currency, you do that?
Up until now, why not? There's no, the mila is to use oil. Up until now, yeah, you could see which one burns longer, but yeah, definitely. Why wouldn't you not be able to if it looks the same? The shaila is if it doesn't look the same, maybe these are hiddur in that also.
The oil is, a lot of people put the shamish on regular candle.
Yeah, the shamash is only for, because the asal shtamash layer we put a shamash, but that's not part of the mitzvahs adlaka. So you're right, a shamash, even if you, let's say lefira maral, that you have to use oil and you're not yotzei with a candle, of course the shamash you can use a candle.
Using oil because it's burning nicely, as long as it's oil. Does that mean, what defines oil? Any liquid that burns?
I think not, Moshe. I think only oil that burns. You know by the Ahmad, a lot of shuls, that little thing, that's not oil. Yeah, you're not yoitze with that because that's not oil. The oil is not because it burns nicely. Anything that burns nicely, that's the first level. But the second level, to use oil, but doimit to what was in the Beis Hamikdash. So yes, it would be oil, but cottonseed oil, any type of oil, it should be oil. The Menorah was lit with Shem, and we want to be bedoime to the ness of Hanukkah of the oil in the Beis Hamikdash. Smell of oil.
Oil coming from a fruit or a plant. Not like motor oil.
Why is that any better than kerosene?
I don't know, but why? It's because it's called the store, the companies call it oil. It's really oil. What defines oil?
It's an extract from the plant.
According to the Menorah, would you be able to use what?
That's an interesting shayla, Taka. What defines it to be shemen?
What they have in the shuls. Because it's not real oil, but it needs a cup. In the Menorah, do you need dafka oil or?
You bring up Shlomi, a good point, Taka. Let's say something that's not an oil, but you need a cup. L'cha'oira lafida maral would be good. It's interesting. He's going lafuke a candle, but he says oil. So you're asking l'cha'oira oil just means that it's a liquid that has to be in a cup. Very good.
So what about the near and them?
One second. Menach Gilfesh Apostle. Nikra neir klal rak zeh nikra neir shenoisen hashemen bakli, and you put in a wick, as opposed to wax that goes around the wick. That's not a nair. So you're right. Shemen wouldn't dafka be because it's shemen. He speaks about the mile of shemen, but not Medina. You don't need dafka shemen. You need a liquid. Very good. Good point.
So shemen
To be called, yeah. What'd you say?
Actual shemen will only be zeichel and
Yeah.
It's a hidden voice of our
Right, that's what would come at richtig. You need the maral. It's a chiddush. We don't pass like that. You need liquid. We thought shemen l'chayr any liquid to be considered nair. You're right. Shemen is only a hiddur. You're right. Means the maral's machay of something they need a cup for.
Well, then near and them. Near and them is wax, but you need a cup for it.
Paraffin?
Congealed.
Congealed, we're going to speak about. We'll get to that in a minute. Neranim, like a lot of people use it. I use it for Shabbos, the candles. So when you light it, it melts in a cup. Would that be feed of my row?
I don't think you need a cup.
You
Worst case, the wax
light
drips down the
it'll fall
side
all
like
over
a
the place.
candle. It'll drip down the lester, but that's I don't think you need a cup.
And it would burn, but does it melt right away, the whole thing? If it melts right away, you need it that it should burn for a half hour.
Right away.
It could last for a half
Don't
hour.
think?
No, it doesn't melt.
You got a big one. Let's say you got a big one.
The AC's blowing on there and it's just dripping. It's the same thing. It's in the
So l'chayr wouldn't be good. L'chayr wouldn't be good l'fida maral. Why? Because the etzim it could use for itself. It's just like if you put a candle in a cup, you don't need it.
He lets also in the container.
Very good. But if you don't have it, taka, it'll burn. Yeah. Good point. L'chayr taka, those should congealed. We'll get to in a minute. But ne'eranim l'chayr l'fida maral. You need that the cup should to cause it to be a candle.
Why do you think eliminate you ought to use any oil?
So-
It's like a difference. The nace was a specific oil.
So let's get to that in a minute. We'll see how bedoima do you need in the oil. We'll get to that momentarily, but pashtus, we're doing it bedoima to the Menorah in the Beis Hamikdash. So we'll see. Your point, in which we'll get to in a minute, about Shem and Zayas, and what's about Zach, what's about everything. We'll get to that in a minute. But the Vaila, and we'll see. We're gonna get to it. Some Sefer speaks about it. But the Vaila was saying that the mile of using Shemen is these hiddur of Shemen. Now it's just interesting to note that if you're going to go with the hiddur of candles, there is a hiddur that's applicable to candles that's not applicable to oil, which is the Magen Avraham speaks about it. The Mishnah Berurah brings it that by candles, these are mile of big candles. The Shah is what the Hezbollah is exactly. Magen Avraham explains a little. They much to understand. But by candles, these are mile of big candles, as opposed to oil. A big cup of oil, there is no hiddur. It's very nice. It burns longer, but there's no hiddur, as opposed to using big candles. You see, the Magen Avraham says just like there's a hiddur to use to have a big lulav and to have a big esrei. That's the Magen Avraham. So Mamela over here also by Chanukah Menorah he says in wax he's a mile of using candles, big candles.
But is there an Indian for it to burn like throughout most of the night? So the more oil you put in, then the longer the burn.
Could be there's an Indian. We're talking about the hiddur and the adlaka. You have to light it to burn for a half hour. Pashtas after a half hour already, it's not even. You could maybe even be in the hand of lawyer. It's already you yoytz at a mitzvah. Yeah. Oh, So Atkan, we spoke about using oil, bedoime to the Beis Hamikdash. Here comes the next step. The Kolboy says, and really it's also in others, the Kolboy says that there's a mile of using Shem and Zayis, not just any oil, but to use olive oil, because olive oil is what they use in the Beis Hamikdash, and that's more of a hiddur when you're going with hiddur. Again, me'ikar adin, you could use anything. However, when you want to be makayim the hiddur, be madlak and makayim the mitzvah, bihidura, you should use olive oil, says the Kolboy. It's brought already in others. The Ram Leniel says, "V'mitzvah habufcheres lahadlik b'shem zayis, shem zayis, olive oil fisher boy hayanes." And there's already, it's brought in the, so to speak, the poskim, the lahalacha. The Levush says, "Mitzvah ben amufcha lahadlik b'shem zayis shaboy nasa nes." The Chai Adam, v'kol mitzvah ben amufcha likich shem zayis, dom the nesa beis hamikdash, and the others the kitzur shulchan aruch. So we're holding now that there's a mila of using olive oil, Shem and Zayis. The Rand says the reason why it's also l'shtamish lo'ira, for us in the Neirus of Chanukah, because it's dumya, the Beis Hamikdash was also to be in the hand from the Neirus and the Menorah, it's moil behegdish. So we want to be bedoima, just like the Menorah and the Beis Hamikdash. So the Pnei Yeshua asks, if we want to be bedoima to the Menorah and the Beis Hamikdash, why is there no requirement to use Shem and Zayis bedoime to the Beis Hamikdash? Even the Gemara, Lafita, what we mentioned earlier, that may be speaking about Chanukah, the Gemara says you should use oils that burn nicely. But is there no chiyuv to use olive oil bedoime that we're saying that it's also a shtamish loyer because they want it to be bedoime to the Menorah in the Beis Hamikdash? So the Pnei Yeshua says v'yesh yashiv. The Chassam Sofer says that really Itaka would have been a nice thing to use olive oil bedoime to the Menorah in the Beis Hamikdash. However, they were not machayev Shem and Zayis because it's not common to use. The lashon he says is v'zeh lo yimotzei le'echad be'ir v'shnayim v'mishpacha. Baruch Hashem, now there's a lot of olive oil, and taka you could be, but me'ikar adin to be machayev, that should be the tzura of the mitzvah, that they weren't machayev. We spoke in a previous year many dinim that are bedoima in the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah, bedoima to the menorahs of the Menorah of the Beis Hamikdash. I think maybe 8 things that are doima. But the shaila is, why didn't they machayev that the mitzvah should be done with Shem and Zayis? Because there isn't enough Shem and Zayis out there to machayev that you need to use Shem and Zayis. Now let's try to go into Shem and Zayis and see the different types of milas in Shem and Zayis itself. Candles that are congealed, that are hard, when you light them, they melt, so to speak, and then they turn into oil. So the shaila is in the poskim, which the poskim say it's good, but the shaila is, maybe when you're lighting it, whether adlaka is a mitzvah, you're not lighting with olive oil, you're lighting with Shem and Zayis, or you're lighting with something else. Reb Vosner has a tshuva about it, and Reb Vosner says, misprobably in the Beis Hamikdash it wasn't good, because when it's congealed, oil that's congealed loses its Shem, its name of Shem and Zayis. It's not good in the Beis Hamikdash. However, to say that for hiddur you can't use it, it's not mastabri. He says for hiddur you could use it. So congealed oil, even though we want to be bedoibet to the Beis Hamikdash, and we use Shem and Zayis, but that much to say that you're not yoitza, it's lacking in the hiddur, that we don't say, and you could use congealed oil.
Once you light it, doesn't it dissolve right away?
Somewhat right away, but even if it takes a little bit of time while you're lighting it, is that Shem and Zayis? Let's say like this, in the Beis Hamikdash, you couldn't use it because b'shas adlaka you're not lighting with olive oil. So the shaila is that lacking in the hiddur when you want to use olive oil? So Vosner says it doesn't. Be'idach, in Shuvas van Haggis Ramosha Sternbach, he's mitzaded, that maybe not. And he says, first of all, because of the Beis Hamikdash, it wasn't good. V'oid, and we want to be bedoimit to the Beis Hamikdash. That's even the whole reason why we take olive oil. V'oid, he says, is that since adlaka is a mitzvah, b'shas adlaka you're not lighting olive oil, even though it takes a few, seconds later already turns into oil. But while you're lighting, he's mitzaded not to use it.
What's the end of Beis Hamikdash? It wouldn't be good.
Because it loses its Shem Shem and Zayis.
Says that.
Reb Vosner. See if I have the Lashon even.
I'm saying we have a part. He learns it from someplace. He says how what?
V'hinei le'inyan beis hamikdash. He has a Thomas. He goes into it. Why? He says Yirali the apostle bottle mohos Shem, and he brings the Rambam Shem shenikrash le'oichav le'mashka. The Rambam says in Thomas Oichlim that when it's nikrash, when it's congealed, it doesn't have Thomas Oichlim, loses its Shem. So it loses its Shem. So for the beis hamikdash also Yira. So we have over here congealed lakan or lakan. If you could use it, it's not if you can't use it. The question is, in Hider, is this included in the Hider?
So I know you're probably going to mention this. The congealed part becomes uncongealed after, let's say, 3 minutes. When you light a wick that's coated in wax.
Oh, we're going to speak my very good Moshe. We'll get to that momentarily also. What's much faster?
That becomes, you're starting to burn oil much faster.
By congealed or by the coated in wax?
Coated in wax.
Coated in wax, yeah. So we'll get to coated in wax in a minute. Good point, and that's talking what the Poskim say. We'll get to that in a minute. So congealed, we have over here lakan or lakan. Is it nichlal included in the hidur of using Shem and Zayis? It's interesting to note that the Das Torah, the Marsham brings from the Tshuva Me'ahava, this is the time of the Noid Yehuda, is the Bezin of the Noid Yehuda, that the Nes of Chanukah happened with congealed oil. Which Mameli he says, Gar, it's even a mile to use that. I don't think that's la halacha, but it's interesting that if we're speaking about if congealed is good or not good, even though we said for Vosner that you're not yoitze, he says that the nest happened. I looked it up, the Tshuva Mahava, it's very 1 or 2 lines, but he says that it was congealed. What?
You used to melt it first and then do the black change the temperature?
I don't know what happened then. I don't know.
How'd they get it out of the jar?
So you're saying if that's the case, the way they make it with taruvis, that's questionable also. If it's a little bit, it's bottle. So it's not burning on the oil.
That's what I'm not sure. It's not.
How'd they get it out of the jar? They found the pop chef and you gotta put it in the 7 cups. If it's congealed, how'd they get it out of the jar?
Good, Yitzi, good question. You're asking how did they get it out of the jug? Good question, Taka. And that to get it not only out of the jug, that's what you're saying, that to split it up into the...
It has to stay liquid. If it's congealed, it's not just a temperature thing. It's what makes oil be congealed?
I don't know, that you have to... Scientific, I don't know. But interesting shaila. But that's what they say. I just wanted to bring it out. There's a shaila if you have to use, not to use. Rav Oza says, ain't be a deinu to say you can't use it. It's interesting. The Tshuva Ma'ava says they actually use congealed oil. Now that we're saying that he's a mila of Shem and Zayis because we want to be bedoima to the Shem and to the oil of the Beis HaMikdash, and the question is if maybe congealed is not included in Shem and Zayis, there are a few other hidurim in oil which makes it even more bedoima to the oil on the Beis HaMikdash. Number 1, that the oil should be royal achila, and this Rabbi Yashiv said, I think others as well, the oil should be royal achila. Dumya in the Beis Hamikdash, Menachas Peivav Amar Aleph, oil that wasn't royal achila, you're not yoitza. So maybe you need it to be royal achila.
Paraffin's out.
What?
The paraffin is out.
Yeah, but we're going now. Yes, but we're going now. Even in Shem and Zayis, means cottonseed oil is also out. Out doesn't mean you're not yoitza, but out means that you can't use it because in other words, you're not going to have the hider, so that's also out. It has to be royal achila. Mi'idach. This is a hider. Mi'idach. Michal, this is for you, the Kafachayim. The Kafachayim says, Im Hashem in Mar, the Einoi Bar Achila Shari. He says that you don't need royal achila. This is all again in hider. So, in other words, it's kosher l'tchatchila even though it's ain't a royal achila. It's just good to note and interesting. A lot of bottles, for sure. I remember living in Eretz Yisrael when I heard this, and with Rabbi Yashav, a lot of bottles say ain't a royal achila. It's not editable. And for that, these ways out, they say that first of all, they write it for tax purposes. He's a cheshbon that if it is a food or not, but mainly also, it's written mainly also as it means you can't eat a lot of it. But if you could eat a little bit of it, not that it's poisonous, but a little bit is okay to mix it into our food, that's called roy lachila. So that wouldn't cause an issue. So that's one additional hiddur in Shemen Zayis, that it should be roy lachila. Next, another hiddur that Rabbi Yashiv was makbid in, is, and also Ramosha Steinbach brings in Chuvas Van Hagas, that the oil should not be cooked. Now you're looking at me, it shouldn't be cooked. What do you mean, cook the oil? Who cooks the oil? The way Ramosha Steinbach writes, most of the oils that are made today are made through cooking it. That's how they take it out. That's the way they take it out. So therefore, Rabbi Yashiv said the hiddur would be to use cold pressed oil, which means it's taken out, I guess, the good old fashioned way, that it's pressed as opposed to cooked out, because oil that was cooked is not kosher l'menorah. And finally, another hiddur, a third hiddur. Again, we said that it should be roy lachila, and this is mamash a hiddur agab, a hiddur roy lachila. It should not be cooked, and also it should be shemen zayis zach, pure. Now, pure oil, I mean, that means, like we understand, we know from the Mishnah that with the first bang, I mean, that's what we're talking about. So Rabbi Yashiv says the reason for that is that it should be pure is they got the pureness by the first bang. But let's say you have a way how to get pure oil a different way, that would also be considered pure, as opposed to getting oil from the pieces, from the peels and from the seeds. It has to be pure. So that's different hidurim that it should be b'doimet to the Beis Hamikdash. There's available, it's in Eretz Yisrael, and you could order it in Lakewood. These, I think they call it Rabbi Yashiv oil, but with all these hidurim. Now, what Moshe mentioned before about the wicks that are coated in wax, mainly the floating wicks are coated in wax. So do you have the hiddur by using those of Shemen Zayis? Because l'maisa, when you light it, it's technically like you're lighting a candle. L'gabi de maral, yes, shloden, because the only way it could survive technically is in a cup. But the question is, are you lighting from the first second on? Are you lighting oil or are you lighting wax?
What's the shayla? There's no oil there.
No, floating wicks is in oil, but the wick itself is coated in wax. So when you're lighting it, it takes seconds, maybe even faster than congealed oil, but while you're lighting wax.
I think the regular wicks, most wicks that come today, the warm ones that are
Also, like those red ones, yeah, that's true. Lavdaka floating wicks, yeah. Any wick that's a hard wick, so to speak, it's coated in wax. It does melt right away when you light it. What's the din? So Shlomo Zalman says it's not an issue. First of all, the wax melts right away, and it's considered that you're lighting. He discusses a different issue also, that when you're lighting the wick, you're not lighting the wick, you're lighting the wax, and the wax lighting the wick. So basically, for everything Shlomo Zalman says is that it's all one big hadlaka. When you light the wick, when you light the wax, you're lighting the wick, and you're lighting it's right away, it's connected to the oil. Samela coated wicks is not a problem.
When you put the wick into the oil and it's coated, that has oil on it then.
Very good. So I was just going to say, if you want to be machmer, and the Rebbe Tzin Abba Shaul says that one should be machmer. Yeah, he says you should be machmer. So there's a few eitzes. He speaks maybe more to peel it off. There's another eitzah that others say, which we'll see if it's a fully eitzah, is to light it and put it out. But we'll see. That's if you use new wicks, but light it and put it out, which there's even a mile by Shabbos. And then there's other eitzah that people say you can dip the wick into oil. So mainly what you're lighting is oil.
when you buy the pre-made 40 things that are liquid, the wick inside, even though oil wax is already so full of oil.
So you're saying there wouldn't even be a shaila?
Yeah, they use salt, I think. Yeah, they use salt. They use the white herb.
Atkan lagabe the hiddur of shemen. There's also a hiddur to have a beautiful menorah. To have a nice menorah. The Be'er Heitev brings it. Yatriach lasas like menorah yafa. Umisha yadim aseges. You should have a nice menorah. The Be'er Heitev brings it. Till now we spoke about the hiddur of the oil part. Let's try to very briefly go through the oil and the menorah and the wick. So lagabe the menorah. So Baruch Hashem, quite a lot of us have nice menorahs. But the shaila is, you don't light in the menorah, you light in the glass. So do you lose the whole purpose of having a beautiful menorah? You're not lighting in the menorah, you're lighting in the glass. Does that take away from lighting in a nice menorah? So Reb Shlomo Zalman says, we'll take now the questions after. I want to just finish up. Reb Shlomo Zalman says that since the glass has a little bump on the bottom and it can't stand by itself, Mamela it's bottled to the menorah. So it's like you're lighting in the menorah. It's part of the menorah. Reb Vosen says a little bit differently. He doesn't say because it can't stand by itself. He says since it's made, the menorah is made like that. The glasses are made like that. The menorah is made to have the glass. The glass is made for the menorah, even if there's no bump on the bottom, which means you can put it down on the table. It's bottled to the menorah, and you have the hiddur of the menorah. What's about the hiddur of wicks? Hiddur legabi wicks. So we'll focus on one thing now, is about the wicks, reusing the wicks, which means could you come the second night and use wicks that are already used? It's a little bit shvachamite, it's already used. So the Shulchan Aruch, let's start. The Shulchan Aruch says, Ein choishesh en lepsilas tachlif machatechla. You don't have to change them. You do not have to change the wicks from one night to the next. Mishnah Berurah says, Adarabba, these are maila of using, these are maila when it's lit already, so you don't have to. The Aruch HaShulchan already brings, you could keep the same wicks from night to night. Me'idach, it's even earlier, it's even, the Aruch HaShulchan. Me'idach, the Me'iri El Yerabba, say you should change it. Do me the Beis HaMikdash, like we mentioned before. Just like in the Beis HaMikdash, they did Atavas Haneris, they switched it. Here also you should switch it. The Kaf HaChaim says the same thing. La'alach, you should switch it. First of all, it's doimit to the Beis HaMikdash. And also, another Svari says, every night the nest was mischadish, so maybe you put new wicks. So it's lakana. You wonder if you should switch it or not. Machat Gisa, the Leket Yosha brings from his Rebbe, the Trumas Adeshin. They used to switch it. Me'idach, the Likutei Chaver Ben Chaim, which was a Talmud of the Chassam Sofer, brings that his Rebbe, the Chassam Sofer, did not change it. So lakana about changing the wicks. Those that hold to change it is because it's bedoima to the nest in the Beis bedoima to the neirus, the mitzvahs adlok in the Beis Hamikdash. Just interesting, the B'tzela Chachma says that if you're not going to switch it, he brings on the Meshmeres Shalom that there could be an issue of Ma'ila Makodesh Ve'emeridin. Let's say on the first night that wick, when you lit it, that was the neir that you would need it for the Ikar HaMitzvah. You needed that wick for the Ikar HaMitzvah. Now, when you're going to light the second night, that first nair is only a hiddur. So you're being moirid that first wick from the Ikar HaMitzvah to hiddur. Lamaisi says you don't have to be choishesh, because anyways, after a half hour already, it's not the mitzvah, and you could do it, unless it goes out during a half hour. So maybe you could use the same wick over, and you don't have to move it. The Meshmeres Shalom says you should move that wick to the one that you makayim the mitzvah. And just to conclude with one last shaila, what's about using electric menorahs? Can't just discuss it now in 1 minute, but just based off the whole shir, the different milas. So the Beis Yitzchak obviously says there's no hiddur, because he's a mile of hiddur of Shem and Zayis, but he says you're not yotzeh. Why you're not yotzeh with electric menorah? Which, by the way, is negeya. It's negeya if you're on an airplane. It's negeya if somebody's Rahman al-San in a jail. It's negeya if somebody's in a hospital and they don't let you light with fire. So what's the halacha? Beis Yitzchak says you're not yotzeh because there's no presuma nisa. People say it's electric. You're using it for that. Others say other reasons. The Kaf HaChaim says, you know why it's not good? Because you don't have oil and a wick. It's not a person that's doing it. Others say such a svar also when you hit a button, you're not doing a ma'isa adlaka, and it looks like a medura, like a big fire, as opposed to just a wick fire. So meila, you're not yotzeh. Me'idach, Reb Shlomo Zalman says, maybe, he's mesupek, maybe it could be yotzeh, b'mokem atzoyrech, ba'ofen shenikar, which usually that's the case. When you light, we have the electric on, you're not lighting the menorah to have light in the room, maybe he's mesupik, could be yotzeh. So just to sum it up, we spoke about the mitzvahs, hadlaka, yibakayim with anything, bihidura, either to burn nicely, you should use oil b'daim l'beis hamikdash, and even more of a hiddur is to use Shem and Zayas, and in Shem and Zayas, could be there's even more hidurim, that it should even be more b'daim to the beis hamikdash. Have a wonderful day. You're right. He says clearly, even if